The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Jeremiah Manele, Prime Minister of Solomon Islands. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, heads of states and heads of governments, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Madam President, I bring to you and all members of this august assembly warm island greetings from the government and people of the Happy Isles. We congratulate you, Madam President, on your assumption of office as President of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Let me also commend your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang, for his sterling leadership of the 79th session of the General Assembly. Solomon Islands further acknowledge the Secretary General of the United Nations for his courage and strength in defending multilateralism. As we gather under the theme, Better Together, 80 years and more for peace, development, and human rights, I am reminded of the words of John Ellison, and I quote, "There is no peace without development, no development without peace, and neither without respect for human rights," end of quote. These words reflect the essence of our journey over the past 8 decades. We celebrate our collective triumph of humanity when we choose unity over division, cooperation over conflict, and justice over indifference. 80 years ago, in the aftermath of the Second World War, the world chose to build than destroy. The United Nations Charter is a covenant of hope, peace, and progress. It is based on the principle of sovereign equality, one country, one vote. The United Nations has since grown from 51 to 193 member states, becoming a force for development, human rights, and humanitarian support, giving voice to the vulnerable and inspiring global progress and prosperity. This is the proud legacy of the United Nations, a legacy that I pray must not only be cherished, but also carried forward with renewed vigor and purpose. Madam President, we meet at a moment of profound uncertainty, marked by deepening conflicts, armed aggression, widening inequalities, and the growing disregard for international law. The erosion of the United Nations Charter principles, the alarming return of unilateralism, threatens the very foundation of our multilateral system. We note the deep concern that the world is now overarmed, spending less on development, and increasingly adopted a militarized posture. We need to halt and reverse these non-peaceful trends. We seek a region free from nuclear weapons, militarization, trafficking of illicit drugs, and geopolitical posturing. My sub-region recently adopted the Ocean of Peace Declaration. It is rooted in the Pacific's collective history and culture. It is our collective vision for a resilient, peaceful, and a prosperous blue Pacific continent. We reclaim our sovereignty, support multilateralism, and a rules-based international order grounded on international law. This week, Solomon Islands signed onto the declaration for the protection of humanitarian personnel, noting that 380 humanitarian personnel paid the ultimate sacrifice last year. It is our collective responsibility to respect international humanitarian law, protect the safety of humanitarian personnel and civilians, and instill accountabilities for all in disaster and war zones. Madam President, climate change is a crisis multiplier that is defining our future. The World Meteorological Organization declared 2024 was the warmest year on record. This pushes us further off track from the 1.5 degrees goal we agreed to in Paris. Solomon Islands, despite having a minimal carbon footprint, has submitted an ambitious net positive third national determination contribution, NDC. We can do more with international partnerships, investing in reforestation and the conservation of our forest, including renewable energy investments. We need urgent and ambitious climate action now that puts us on a 1.5 degrees pathway. Large emitters and those with historical responsibility must take the lead in drastically cutting emissions. Contrary to what we heard here a few days ago, the science on climate is clear, and my people are suffering from it. On 23 July 2025, the International Court of Justice, ICJ, issued a landmark advisory opinion in response to a request by the United Nations General Assembly under Resolution 77276. The court was asked to address two interrelated questions. First, the obligation of states under international law to protect the climate system from harmful greenhouse gas emissions, including duties owed to both present and future generations, in keeping with the principle of intergenerational equity. Second, the legal consequences for states whose actions or inactions cause significant harm to the climate system and the environment. This includes the responsibilities owed to injured or especially affected states, such as small island developing states that suffer the greatest impacts despite contributing the least, as well as to peoples and individuals, including future generations whose fundamental rights and livelihoods are threatened. Solomon Islands welcome the historical advisory opinion of the ICJ and support ongoing process for a follow-up UN resolution. Madam President, the court has made clear that states carry binding obligations to act on climate change, to prevent harm, to cooperate, and to protect the rights of both present and future generations. These duties are legal, moral, and universal, and hold states accountable to stop harmful practices, to prevent repetition, and to repair the damage caused. Madam President, Solomon Islands also raised the issue of climate displacement. Entire communities are already at risk of losing their homes and homelands. The court has now confirmed that the principle of non-refoulement applies, which means that no state can lawfully return people to places where climate change makes survival impossible. This is indeed a powerful affirmation that rights to life, food, water, and habitable land must be protected. For us small island developing states, this recognition is existential, and it reminds us that climate obligations are erga omnes, owed to the world as a whole, demanding collective responsibility for a shared future. The Court's opinion is a powerful reminder and a fervent call that better together we are bound by law and by duty to act. It rejected narrow interpretations that limit obligations to the Paris Agreement, affirming instead that all states must cut emissions under human rights law, the law of the sea, customary international law, and other treaties. It made clear that the 1.5 degrees Celsius target is legally binding, that major emitters cannot evade responsibility, even those outside the Paris Agreement, and that breaches will carry consequences, including reparations for harm caused and accountability for failing to address fossil fuel production, subsidies, and consumption. For small and developing states, this opinion brings hope and recognition. It affirms that even if rising seas inundate our islands, our statehood and maritime boundaries will endure, preserving our sovereignty and our rights. Madam President, this is more than a legal finding. It is indeed a call to the international community that only better together can we honor the 1.5 degrees Celsius commitment, protect the most vulnerable, and secure a just and sustainable future for all nations and peoples. Solomon Islands wishes to acknowledge the exemplary leadership of Vanuatu and the tireless efforts of Pacific youth who have stood at the forefront of this initiative. Their voices and vision have carried the urgency of our cause onto the global stage, reminding us that the strength of the Pacific lies in our unity. Though small in size, our island nations are large in purpose. And when we stand together, governments, communities, and young people alike, we embody the very theme of this assembly: better together, 80 years and more for peace, development, and human rights. As Pacific Islands Forum Chair, I am pleased to announce the establishment of the Pacific Resilience Facility. It is a Pacific-owned and Pacific-led response to the escalating impacts of climate change and disasters on our peoples. Our goal is to capitalize the fund by USD 500 million by the end of 2026. We acknowledge partners and investors who have pledged USD 166 million. We call for more partnerships for the facility. On the question of COP31, Solomon Islands supports Australia's bid to host COP31. It will provide a vital opportunity for the Pacific to amplify its voice and demand stronger climate action. Madam President, as a big ocean state with 98% of our territory covered by ocean, the lives and livelihoods of our people are inextricably linked to the health and resilience of the marine environment. Solomon Islands is proud to stand among the 60 countries that have ratified the BNJ agreement, and we look forward with great anticipation to its entry into force early next year. While the BBNJ agreement is a critical step forward for the stewardship of the world's oceans, it must be accompanied by robust conservation and sustainable use within areas of national jurisdiction. At the United Nations Ocean Conference, at the third United Nations Ocean Conference, Solomon Islands launched the Melanesian Ocean Reserve Initiative. The initiative unites sovereign nations, sovereign oceans, under indigenous stewardship to support ecological resilience and sustainable growth, using both traditional knowledge and scientific research in line with international standards. We are also actively advancing community-based conservation initiatives and undertaking significant efforts in ocean management in alignment with our national ocean policy. This year, Solomon Islands co-hosted a summit on SDG 14.4 with several UN and regional partners. The event gathered Pacific leaders, fisheries organizations, the private sector, and scientists to assess global health of tuna stocks, climate impacts, and strengthen partnerships on small-scale fisheries. Its conclusions were presented at the third UN conference in Nice. Over half of the world's tuna is caught in Pacific waters, and all 4 species, albacore, yellowfin, bigeye, and skipjack, remain biologically healthy. Our region stands ready to collaborate with the international community and share our experience in fisheries management and restoring fishing zones to sustainable level based on science. This is proof that when we act together as stewards of the ocean. Solomon Islands is an archipelagic state that shares maritime border with 5 neighboring countries. Earlier this year, Solomon Islands made 2 continental self-submissions to the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, a bilateral submission with Fiji concerning the Melanesian border plateau, and a trilateral submission with Fiji and Vanuatu for the North Fiji Basin. Solomon Islands looks forward to engaging constructively with the Commission on these matters in the spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. The alarming rate of pollution in the ocean is endangering marine life and the ocean's health. We have banned the use of certain single-use of plastic in 2023. But we remain very concerned that negotiations on a legally binding treaty on plastic pollution has stalled. We have a collective interest to finalize that treaty and protect our ocean. On deep-sea mining, Solomon Islands is taking a precautionary approach and has placed a moratorium on it. On the same note, we support a regional approach on deep-sea mining as agreed to by our forum leaders early this month. Madam President, only 35% of SDGs are on track to meet their targets by 2030. The Pact of the Future was our collective commitment to turbocharge sustainable development. We can and must deliver on this pledge. Solomon Islands government's policy to achieve the SDGs and address our development challenges centers on 4 pillars: unity and stability, economic transformation, game-changing infrastructure development, and human capital development. These priorities are supported by reforms, responsible investments, climate-resilient infrastructure, and human resource development. We are prioritizing the productive sector to drive economic transformation with strategic focus on agriculture, fisheries, tourism, and mining. This is reflected in our national budget to enable private sector-led growth. As Solomon Islands prepares for LDC graduation in 2027, strengthening trade relations and these development areas remain critical. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the importance of global cooperation in health, including the sharing of medical technology. In this connection, Solomon Islands welcome the endorsement of the Pandemic Treaty adopted at the 78th session of the World Health Assembly and looks forward to its full implementation. Non-communicable diseases, NCD, has reached crisis level in the Pacific. In the case of Solomon Islands, 87% of deaths are NCD related. NCD accounts for 84% of Solomon Islands adult hospital admission, placing stress on our health system. This year, we have significantly increased our health budget to restore health services and manage NCDs and neglected diseases. Solomon Islands welcomes the convening of the high-level meeting on NCDs and mental health. The Pacific is confronted with rising mental health and abuse of drugs. Integrating the 2 health issues into primary health care, supported by trained health workers to support, screen, manage the well-being of our people. Madam President, my delegation welcomes the Secretary General's reform agenda, the UNGA80 initiative, and the vision to revitalize the United Nations and its operations. The UN must evolve with the new realities and remain responsive to the special circumstances and needs of SEEDs and LDCs. We support China's global governance initiative to strengthen multilateralism, preserve sovereign equality of states, observe international law, and placing people-centered development with an action-oriented approach. Solomon Islands support ongoing efforts to develop a governance framework to manage responsible use of artificial intelligence for development, combat misinformation, cybersecurity challenges, protection of data and privacy. These are new and emerging issues we cannot ignore. Madam President, Solomon Islands reiterates its call for an elevated UN presence. The time has come to review the UN regional architecture to ensure it remains connected to the members that need it most. Solomon Islands remains underrepresented within the UN staff establishment. We call on the UN to consider convening in-country competitive recruitment exams in Solomon Islands. On Security Council reform, we seek a more democratic, expanded council that reflects today's geopolitical realities. The use of the veto by the council continues to undermine peace, international law, and expose the vulnerable to harm. The veto must be eliminated as part of the reforms of the council. We hope to see proposals shift into text-based negotiations under your presidency. Solomon Islands is seeking, for the first time in 46 years, a non-permanent seat in the UN Security Council for the period 2032 to 2033. We registered our interest 11 years ago. Let me thank countries who have confirmed their support for our candidature over the years. As a peace-loving country, Solomon Islands is keen to contribute to UN peacekeeping missions this year. Ladies and gentlemen, we must do more for peace, protect civilians, especially children and women, and hold those accountable for such action. Inaction puts a human face to the sad situation in Gaza, where more than 60,000 lives have been lost. Solomon Islands condemn Hamas attacks on Israel and for all lives lost. We also call for the release of all remaining hostages and an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. This is critical for regional stability and global peace. Solomon Islands reaffirms its consistent support for a peaceful and permanent solution to the Israeli and Palestine conflict. We look forward to Palestine and Israel living side by side in peace, along secured borders in accordance with international law, UN resolutions, and the UN Charter. Let us give peace a chance and put an end to one of the world's unyielding conflicts, marked by displacement, occupation, and the unnecessary loss of lives. Madam President, Solomon Islands reaffirm its strong commitment for the total elimination of nuclear weapons. This year, the Pacific celebrates 40 years since the adoption of the South Pacific Nuclear-Free Treaty. The Pacific has been used to test weapons, store nuclear waste, and discharge treated nuclear water. We see the scars of nuclear impacts and will remain the world's strongest advocates for a world free of nuclear weapons. Unexploded ordnance from World War II remains a threat to our communities, people, and obstruct development. Solomon Islands would like to acknowledge the United States, Japan, and Australia in disposing World War II UXOs and carcinogenic substances buried in our land and seas left behind from World War II. This is the cruel reality of a war we never chose, yet whose scars we continue to carry. Justice demands that those responsible accept their duty to help heal the wounds they left behind. And it is only by standing better together in solidarity, with shared responsibility and compassion, that we can finally close this painful chapter of history and build a safer, more just future for our people. Madam President, Solomon Islands continue to value the partnerships we share with all countries and institutions for development. These partnerships have been crucial to our development in the past 47 years. We express gratitude to Australia's long-standing partnership and support to Solomon Islands across all development objectives of our national development strategy. China's infrastructure projects in health, transport, and communication are enabling economic growth and transforming lives. We thank the government and people of the People's Republic of China for this growing partnership. Solomon Islands reiterates and reaffirms its respect for the One China principle. New Zealand's support to expanding and upgrading airports across the country and the fisheries sector addresses our key development areas. Japan's work on one of our key provincial hospitals, economic infrastructure, and capacity development is very much appreciated. Complementing these efforts, we acknowledge support from Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the European Union, and India. We acknowledge the support through partnership with the UN system, multilateral development banks such as the Asian Development Bank, World Bank, the IMF, and look forward to new partnerships, including with the OPEC Fund for International Development and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. On the same note, Solomon Islands' journey thus far has been supported by our private sector, state-owned enterprises, and NGOs. We thank you for your commitment and partnership. Madam President, Solomon Islands reaffirms the right to self-determination as enshrined in the UN Charter. In closing, Madam President, each year we meet in this august chamber, carrying the hopes and aspirations of our people, to forge a collective future where peace, development, and dignity are pursued for all. This is the responsibility we must take seriously and respond to with sincerity and urgency. For small islands developing states like Solomon Islands, a strong multilateral system is not an ideal, but a necessity. It ensures that every nation has a voice, that power does not silence principle, and that cooperation nor cohesion guides our global affairs. The United Nations must be reformed and remain relevant and stand as the cornerstone of a multilateral system, with humanity at its heart. As we commemorate 80 years of our United Nations, we must also recognize that this year, 2025, marks the close of the first quarter and the dawn of the second quarter of this 21st century. This is not only a milestone to celebrate, but also a moment to reflect on the path that we have collectively or individually taken, and looking into the future, the course we must now chart better together. From 2000 to 2025, the world has faced defining moments that shaped our shared journey. We lived through global terrorism, a financial crisis that shook economies, a pandemic that tested our resilience, and the accelerating impacts of climate change. Yet we also achieved remarkable milestones, including but not limited to the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, advances in technology, and the strengthening of the institution of family. These experiences remind us that humanity's progress and survival depend on our ability to act better together. As this year marks not only a moment of reflection, but also of shared responsibility. What we do today to secure peace, to drive sustainable development, and to uphold human rights will set the path for the next 25 years. Our choices now will define whether we stand united in hope or divided in regret. Come 2025, when future leaders gather in this assembly, what will we present to them? let it not be scars of missed opportunities, but a legacy of courage and cooperation. Let it be proof that when the world chose to act better together, we secured a safer, peaceful, fairer, and a more sustainable future for our children. Madam President, Excellencies, imi together, tage tumas. I thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of Solomon Islands.